Hi, everybody. This is Pegine, and I have the honor and the joy of having a special guest today that we're going to be talking about something that everybody has been talking about, which is, well, not everybody, but everybody is dealing with it, which is remote leadership. How do you lead your teams remotely? The guest that I have today is someone that I've had the honor of getting to know and meet. She is an executive leader with expertise in virtual leading, talent development. She delivers results, especially in the areas of information technology, relationship building, and program management. She looks at process improvement and has a great deal of extensive background in vendor management. She's worked with one of the major insurance companies for several years. I'm not going to use decades. I'm going to say several years. And what I love about who I'm introducing you to is I love her insight into remote leadership. When we talk about leading in a diverse world, we are living in it right now. This is a whole new way of leading, of managing your teams. And some of you that are watching, you have struggled with, how do I manage my virtual teams? How do I manage my people? We used to have them right down the hall, and now they're in their house and you're in your house. And how do we do it? So everybody, please welcome Jill Whipple. Now, I will say, if you have any comments, please make sure that you post your comments. If you're posting while we're live, we'll see and we'll be able to share it with Jill. Jill, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Pegine. I'm really excited to be here with you and to talk about this really valuable topic that is everybody's embracing at this time.
Everybody is embracing it, and you have what a lot of people don't have, which actually is experience in this. Can you share a little bit about your experience and the many ways you've managed remote leadership?
Absolutely. I'd love to share that with you. So I, as you said, worked for a very large insurance company, and I was based here in Jacksonville, Florida, but had teams across the United States, even globally in other countries such as Ireland and India. And I have been managing, projects and teams in this manner for well over 15 years. And so it can be done, and you just have to kind of, learn what those tricks and techniques are in order to do that, because they're not sitting there personally with you. So some of the ways that I've really found, probably two of my top ones, again, one is by having really, I'm going to steal it from the agile world. It's kind of that daily stand up, and it's that daily check in with your team. Talk about, what are they working on? Talk about what are their impediments that they're dealing with, and what do they need from you as a leader or from the rest of your team. And it does not have to be long. I've found them to be very productive if they're only about 10 minutes, but it really gives the team that sense of being together and thriving towards the same common goal.
So let me just clarify what I'm going to ask you about this. So you have implemented in your times as leader is this where you're actually calling them in for a certain amount of time, and everybody gives their feedback, right? That's great. So you do that on a weekly basis, and
these would actually be done on a daily basis.
On a daily basis. Awesome.
Just at the beginning of the day, 10, 15 minutes, and it really just brings the team together. And if you can't attend because of a conflict, that's fine, but at least you're there and you're touching base with each other. Because when you have people that are in 5, 6 different locations, that might be the only time that they speak to each other the entire day.
Right.
So by bringing them together, it really does help. And oftentimes they might be facing some of the same challenges, but they don't necessarily think about, oh, I should reach out to this person. And this kind of helps them and brings them together.
What a great way to connect people and to remind them that they're valuable and everybody else is valuable too.
Right.
And you had a second step that you were going to suggest.
So my second one is at the end of the day, reaching out to each person individually. And it might be just a quick instant message with them. How are you doing? Is there anything that you need from me? But and you kind of are bookending the whole day. So you've talked to them at the beginning of the day, and then you've talked to them at the end. And it could have been that you've talked to them multiple different ways, different times during the day. But this really ensures that they know that you're there for them as a leader.
And so it's a lot of structure that you're saying. So it's on everybody's date book. This is the time that we're all getting together for a quick 10-minute, no matter where you are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then they know from your consistency that you care at the end of the day, that in some shape or form, you're going to spend that time connecting with each and every one of your team members. That's fantastic. So in your experience, what has been some of the feedback that you got from your team members when you have implemented that?
They feel much more engaged, a part of the team, and that they're really cared about. And I think it's that cared about part that's critical, because you're not just asking them to do work. I mean, you are, but you need them to really know that they're thought of and cared about. And that's going to really significantly improve what they're going to bring to the table.
So this makes me, not that we had this plan, but it just made me think about an instant where, I was talking with somebody about the productivity levels of remote workers, and making sure that that they're doing their job. You also know that some may not be quite doing their job up to par.
Mm-hmm.
This technique, I think, would make everybody know you're being held accountable too.
Correct. Because I do not see myself as a micromanager. I'm much more of a participative type of a leader. I'm in there with you, understanding the work, which is really critical. And if you're that type of a leader, you can tell when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then it becomes a good coachable moment, because, you want to have clear metrics for them, and you're working with them to kind of strive. And then, as with any type of leader, be it remote or in the office, then you start to work with that person. And, one of the things I've learned in my experience, sometimes they're in the wrong role.
Right.
And it's just important to work with them to find a new role. And being in this remote world, you have to be so much more cognizant of that than ever before.
So I want to talk about that. So I'm going to use it this way. I want you to keep on talking about that so we can really do focus on these communication styles to leverage as remote leaders. And I think that's one of the things that you just said, being cognizant of who your people are. Can you go through that a little bit more and share that, and then share some of the communication styles that remote leaders need to leverage?
Sure. So being cognizant is, I've had several experiences where the person just was in the wrong role. And when I was able to pivot them into a different role and get them better focused on their strengths, because I'm a true believer that if you work with somebody's strengths, they're gonna excel so much more. You can't fix them. So by being able to do that, they're just gonna blossom. So I've been able to do that multiple times, and a huge part of that is really your communication style. You kind of have to pivot it depending upon the person you're talking to. But being a very transparent communicator is what I've learned is probably the most important. Being upfront with a person, really telling them, this is as much as I can tell you, or let you know what's really going on. You get so much more out of them. And then listening, and listening not just for their words, but what they're not saying.
Which is much more in this remote environment, you can pick up a lot more than if it was really live one-on-one, right? Do you find that your remote workers are much more, because they're in their space and they're much more relaxed in their space, that you could pick up more indicators than if they were putting the face on in a one-to-one live experience? Are you
True.
finding?
Yeah, yes and no. I do sometimes see that. Oftentimes, when they're live, and I think that's one of the benefits now of what's different is you're seeing so much more video versus I used to be on the phone a lot, so you really had to listen hard.
Mm.
You can see in their expressions what's going on. And then I like the way that you say they're a little more relaxed because they're kind of in their own environment. Some were working from home. Some would have just been in a different location than where I was physically located. So yeah, they tend to, I feel, if you really communicate strongly with them and ask them, like you said, those open-ended questions to get them to talk and give them the space, you're going to find out what's going on.
Love it. Okay, I want to just go back to the transparency piece because there's been a lot of discussion, authenticity, transparency. But you said something that I want to highlight, that you said, there are things that I can tell you, and so I'm going to be forthright about those things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that I could tell you up to a certain point, and I'll share up to that point. In remote work, how does that work with communications? Because I do think that, and this is my own perception, and so you can fix my perception if it's wrong, and you can help me understand if I need guidance in this. That sounds, sometimes your words have different value when you're doing it remotely. So how you say what you say as a leader, the weight of what you say remotely shifts and changes in terms of a perception of how people hear you. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I can definitely see that would be a concern. I think if you have, as a leader, built trust with your team over the past, years that you've been working with them, then that trust has really put that underlying groundwork there. So they're going to be much more apt to hearing what you have to say. And I do think when you're in the remote world, especially if you're talking more on the phone and not using video as much, you have to pay attention to how you're coming across and speak with, with some underlying caring. They need to be able to hear that in you, that you can often get when you're talking to them in person. You just have to kind of pay a little bit more attention to that.
Mm. And so one of the things that I want to ask you, so you have just a wealth of experience. People watching this are people who may, be new to this experience because we seem to have this thing called a pandemic going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so literally their lives has shifted and changed over the last 6 months. So now we're what, 6 months, 9 months into this?
9.
So there's a mindset that, oh, it's going to be over. It's going to be over. I'm doing this for short term. Now it looks like this is going to be, and so many companies are making the decision. This is a good business decision to do work remotely. What advice would you give to the new 9-month-old, right? It's a baby. What advice would you give to that person who's now into this 9 months to help them be a better remote leader?
It is not going to go away. And then, as we heard in the headlines, a lot of companies are really going to pivot to it. Although I pretty much believe that we're going to see the pendulum come back. And I think we're going to see companies offer both. Because there's people that are going to go back in. There's people that are never going to want to go back in. But the best thing you can do is ask your employees, how is it going? And ask them 18 different ways so you can really find out what's working well for them and what is not working well for them. And ask them for their feedback on how to improve it. Don't try to fix it without getting them engaged, because it's just not going to work. They're going to think, oh yeah, you're throwing something at me again, versus how can you as a team continue to work? It's like any other process improvement that you're working on. Go to your teams and find out, because they know how to make it better. They've got the great ideas. You just have to ask them. So that's probably my number one clue. My other one,
brilliance. So
my,
I just want to highlight that what you just said is such your brilliance in talent development and employee engagement, and how strong you are in that depth of questioning. It was so funny as you were talking. I was like, oh God, this is such her area of expertise. Then of course my little other snarky person was like, I don't have the time to do that.
mm,
And we see that in leaders. I'm sure that you have seen leaders who didn't take the time to really invest in listening to their teams. In the changes in the leading of a remote workforce, I really want you to talk to that, and also talk to the kind of leader that all leaders need to become in this environment that we're in right now.
the time is critical. I mean, to me, when you are leading a team, if your company has put you in that position, you have to make the time. You don't have a commute anymore. So you can take that time and use it to lead your team and be a part of their lives. And by doing it, it's just your team's gonna show such better results, because you really worked with them and gotten to know them and helped them to, build better, whatever it is, whatever widgets your company is making. Some other great kind of tools and techniques that I think are really important is, I don't just start talking about the work. I really want to know how they're doing too, and talking to them about their personal lives, especially now they're struggling. I mean, I've talked to several people, they have Zoom fatigue. I mean, it is real. So ask them, how do you want us to have a one-on-one? Do you want it via Zoom? Do you just want it on the phone? And leave it up to them. It's their choice. And that sounds so small, but it's a huge step in getting them to be comfortable with you and everything that you're trying to do with them.
That's such a, you just said something so important about asking how they want to be communicated to, because when we're talking about some of the changes, Zoom, yes, they're getting exhausted. Mm-hmm. Phone calls becoming very refreshing. People are finding them very refreshing, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's that Twitter. Not Twitter, the texting,
yes,
which is the other choice of communication. Mm-hmm. I like how you're saying, asking the question, how do you want to communicate? Because that really covers all the people and their needs. So what's your favorite way of communicating?
I actually enjoy the Zoom because I'm such a people person. I like seeing people, but I'm also very comfortable being on the phone. I know people thought a phone was growing out of my ear back when I was working, because I was on the phone all the time. But I love just, being able, ideally sitting down and having a cup of coffee, but it's great to be able to do it on a video.
That's great. So what other changes are you seeing in leading in their remote?
So sadly, I read an article a couple of months ago now, Pegine, that talked about the struggle that women were having in this whole video environment. And they felt like between that, they were not being seen. And so it was going to kind of have a concern with their career growth. And then, as we know, a lot of them are struggling because they've got young kids at home and all of that. So that, again, as a leader, recognizing what your team is going through and helping them. And if you've got an introverted, or what I would call a kind of a quiet leader, they have a hard time speaking up in a conference room. Mm-hmm. They really don't want to speak up in a Zoom or video environment. So you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to ask their opinion. Right. If you're in a meeting, you've got to really say, okay, Sue, what's your opinion? Because they aren't oftentimes going to just give it to you.
Absolutely. One of the best techniques that I learned a long time ago through, I had been at a course up in Boston, and it was a professor that was talking to that he wanted to ensure that he was giving everybody a chance. And
Mhm.
he had realized that unintentionally he wasn't doing that. And so he actually, uses a tick mark. So he just has his whole, he just made a form up on his paper.
Mhm.
So he knows all the people and he makes copies of it, and he just makes sure that at least in the class, everybody is being asked something. And I know that I've done it on my Zooms. So I make sure
Mhm.
as I'm looking across, everybody is saying something. I use the tick, like, who did I miss? Where did it go? And it's really funny because I will then ask, who did I miss? And that person will not say anything, but everybody else, oh,
That's right.
Miss Jill. And Jill's like, oh, God
Darn.
darn it.
Like the kid in the back of the classroom.
Didn't want to be noticed. Didn't want to be noticed. So I wanted to ask you, are there any other changes in leading in the remote workforce that you wanted to share with us?
No, not that I can think of right now.
So then I'm going to really ask you, because I think it's really interesting how you look in the world at people, productivity, and teams. You're just so aware through. And the other piece that I think that people needed to know about you is, while you've been in the technology piece of insurance,
Mhm.
your vast awareness of so many different industries and the power of communication and leading you are able to go into different environments with such ease and grace to build teams. So I wanted to ask you, what's the difference between remote leadership and then being on site in an actual brick and mortar business of leadership?
Amazingly, there really aren't that many differences because at the core, you're a leader and your team is there and they are looking to you to help them grow and drive results for the business. The biggest difference, obviously, is that you're not physically with them. And I've ran into so many times where you'd be like the only person on a call while the rest of the team was in a meeting room, and then you're trying to get your voice out. So this remote has kind of taken that away and leveled the playing field for a lot of people, that they don't have to feel like they have to physically be in the office where everybody is to see them. So I think that's been a benefit of it, but I also feel like people are missing the drive by in the water cooler, and having that quick conversation. And then the last one I've heard a lot of people talk about, because they don't have those drive-bys, they have a lot more meetings on their schedule because people are scheduling meetings. So kind of taking the control of your calendar is really important, and blocking time so you can get work done so you're not on Zoom meetings all day long, I think is important. But again, it's just being a good leader and the style that you are. And as you kind of talked about different industries, I think another huge competency that a leader needs to have is the ability and want to constantly learn. I mean,
Right.
they've been forced into constantly learning this year, and they just need to grab a hold of it and embrace it. And let's keep learning.
So I wanted to I love when you share nuggets and they're normal to you, but I think that there are huge lessons for other people. So one of the things that you said, and everybody, just a reminder, I'm speaking to Jill Whipple, who is a remote leadership expert. She's worked with in a major insurance company, running global teams all over the world remotely. And she knows this whole world of leadership, productivity, people, project management, the communication piece. And I just wanted to let you all know that if you really want to connect with Jill, go to Jill-Whipple in LinkedIn, share with you what you got out of it. That'd be great. Also, you could email her at jillwhipple@me.com. And why you want to do that is, Jill and I spoke, is, she's open to opportunities, open to insights and information. And so, you don't often find a leader that's willing to be extraordinary, leading extraordinary teams. And so I highly recommend that you would reach out, touch, find out. But I'm going to go back to you, Jill, because you said one more, two little pieces of information that I want to capture.
Okay.
One was, because I do think that in time, I do know that it's happening. So there are some companies and organizations that are remote and then brick and mortar. And then what's happening is that the people that are working remote are brought into the meeting via Zoom or maybe through phone.
Mm-hmm.
And, you said if you're one of the people calling in, sometimes it's hard to be heard. And of course, everybody has been seeing the little comedy videos of, do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can we hear you? Can you hear me? And, oh, hi, this is Bob. Who else is here? Can you give a little bit of process and protocol so when those meetings occur, you're strong and seem confident as a leader calling in without doing the hello? Do you hear me? Do you hear me? So can you give a couple of tips over there?
Yeah, I think I love the way you word confident, because you need to confidently announce yourself and you need to be on time. And if you're running a meeting and people are popping in late, I personally feel, do not start the meeting over. They're the ones that were late. So it's not fair to everybody that showed up. And so nothing kind of frustrates me more when they keep recapping. And it's like, okay, now we're 15 minutes into the meeting and I've heard the recap 5 times because people popped in late. So but announce yourself, come prepared with thoughts so that you can speak up and you can add value. And then similarly, like I mentioned, you and I talked about a minute ago, ask people's opinions. Make sure you're drawing those people that are not in the physical room, drawing them in so that they can give their input. Because, the loud ones are going to speak. So.
Absolutely. And you just said something so critically important that I think that people, I don't know why, but people take a live meeting more seriously in terms of showing up on time than they do when it's a call-in meeting, a conference call meeting, or a virtual meeting, right? There seems to be this appreciation of saying, oh, I'm there. I have begun to say that the meeting starts at I start to say the meeting starts at 2:55 because the meeting really starts at 3. But if I say 3 o'clock, then everybody my people who show up on time will be there at 3.
Right.
The people that are late will show up at 3:05. And I just, honestly, I don't have time for that. I'm not going to give you a recap. You're here. Stay quiet. I'll call on you and you can say hello, but you came late to my meeting. I didn't come late to your party.
Right.
And, setting it up, that's great. So I want to make sure that everybody knows this is Jill Whipple, my guest. My name is Pegine, and I'm here to introduce you all and just really want you to get to know Jill. She's an executive leader with expertise in virtual leading, talent development. She actually delivers results, has extensive knowledge about leading in information technology. She's strong relationship building, project management, process improvement, vendor management. She has worked with teams all over the world. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody got to experience what I get to experience when I get to speak with her for brilliance in leadership. So reach out to her at Jill Whipple, that's with a hyphen in the middle of Jill-Whipple. And you can email her at jillwhipple@me.com. Jill, is there anything that you would want to say to close it out to the people that are listening? a tip, something that about this leading in a remote workforce, or anything that you want to say.
First of all, thank you so much. I've had a great time talking with you, Pegine. Always love working with you. My last tidbit would be trust your gut. Good leaders trust their gut. You've got great instincts, and you're not alone. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. I feel like I have to have a song over here that, like a Pepsi or Coke commercial, right? But I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you shared your wisdom and your insight. Everybody, please follow Jill Whipple in LinkedIn. Share your insights, kudos, give your comments, ask questions. Jill is just such a wealth of knowledge, especially in this world of remote workforce and leading in a remote world. Really, that's her expertise. So look forward to seeing you next time when we interview another fantastic person. This is Pegine from Power Women Worldwide, and see ya next time.